Hi, we at Axis 12 have something very exciting to share with you today. First, a brief introduction, and then we'll get right into it. I'm Unison from the Axis 12 community. I will probably make a full introduction video at some point, but for today, we're going to just get right into what we're here to tell you about. Today, we wanted to talk about 3 function modes. Before we get into that, I want to relate this to what you're probably used to hearing about. If you're a member of the typology community, you've been learning about personality types for a long time, you're probably familiar with the cognitive functions. Now, at Axis 12, and sometime in the future, we're going to make a full crash course kind of video on what the Axis 12 system is and how it works. But for right now, we need to just focus on a few things. Depending on the personality system that you've learned about. Maybe you've learned about all of them, but there's some variety. Now, some personality systems like myers-briggs or OP, they use a 4-function model. 4 sides of the mind, socionics. You're probably familiar with the 8-function models. Now, at Axis 12, something that we talk about a lot is something called modes. Now, modes are not just about the functions, they're about how the functions are used together. So when we talk about a mode, it's 2 functions used together, usually. So that could be, doesn't matter what functions, let's say it's TE and SI. You have TE here and you have SI here. Now, what you can see when you watch somebody voltologically, and this is one of the things about voltology that's so exciting, is that you can see in real time what a person is doing. Now, if you watch signals, and these signals happen many times per second, they're very rapid. If you watch for signals like, say you have TE and SI, when a person is engaged in a mode, those signals go back and forth. They'll do a TE signal, then an SI signal, TE signal, SI signal, and it kind of oscillates back and forth. And this is an unconscious phenomena. Nobody's aware that they're doing it. It just happens automatically. And you can see this on waveforms if you inspect somebody's voltological signals. I'll put a picture right here so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see these signals. You see them right now. They kind of flutter back and forth, and they sustain for various periods of time. So that's what a mode is. A mode is functions working together. So that's the basic catch-up. Now, what we want to introduce today as a discovery, we discovered this not too long ago, and we've been comparing these results with multiple people in our community to see if figure out what we're seeing here. Now, sometime in the future, myself and Blink Boy of our community, we're going to do kind of an interview style discussion because a lot went into this discovery. So we'll kind of go over the history of it and how we ran into this. But now, what a 3-function mode is, I said before, a mode, we talk about modes a lot on this channel, and a mode is just 2 functions being used together, and you can see a person switching between one mode and the other and back and forth. What we didn't expect to find, but we found, was that people also do this with 3 functions. Now, what does that look like? Well, it goes in a circle. Like, imagine, so you have, let's say you have TE up here and SI down here, and then say you have FI down here. It goes in a triplet like pattern, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I'll put right here another graphic to kind of show what this looks like in waveform. But it goes in that pattern, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it's consistent. It's when you observe very closely, you observe these little micro expressions and that people are making, you can almost put a metronome behind these signals. That's how periodic and regular they are. So what we have found, we've been looking at these 3-function modes and just puzzled about what they mean. What does it mean when somebody's using 3 functions together? That's 3/4 of their their dominant four-function consciousness. What does this mean? Well, we've noticed a pattern. These three-function modes seem to consistently emulate a function from the other quadra. And how do you know which function it is? Well, it turns out that it's very simple. For every group of three functions, two of those functions are going to be either judging or perceiving. Likewise, two of those functions are going to be either extroverted or introverted. Combine those together, so if you have two judging functions and you have two extrovert functions, it would be emulating the extroverted judging function from the other quadra. So the case I used before was TE, FI, and SI. That would emulate TI. You have two judging functions. You have two introvert functions. TI is the function from the other quadra. It is both judging and it is introvert. Now, what you can find is if you can observe these three function modes in people, and if you can isolate like a period in video, and coming soon we will give examples of this because it's really interesting. It's really interesting, and we hope people get on board with this, whether they're part of Axis 12 or they're completely different groups. This is just exciting stuff. This is such a cool thing to discover. So we can see this in all these cases that we have found where people reliably show three function modes at various points in time. They really do seem to emulate the functions from another quadra. Now, if you're familiar with four sides of the mind, a lot of this probably sounds familiar to you. And, various systems, socionics has various roles for the other four functions. There's various perspectives on this. But what we find is that this is the point of the work that we're doing, is this varies per individual. This is not something that you can say that all types do the same thing, or every one of this type has these emulated functions for these purposes. It does not work that way, and if you try to apply that to people, if you try to apply it to real people, all you run into is exceptions. And this kind of returns us to something that everyone intuitively knew to be true. And that's that people are so different. You can find clusters of behavior somewhere, so it's not as though there are no patterns. There are patterns, but when you look at these three function modes, you find that people individually are emulating other functions to varying qualities. And this is where, again, if you're familiar with four sides of the mind, this will sound real familiar. But it is distinctly different because of the individual nature of these functions that you can observe in real time by watching people's voltological signals. So, the hypothesis that we're putting forth is that these functions are, the other four functions are shadow functions. They're, this is related to the idea of shadow integration. And if you apply it in that way, then on the one hand you have four ego functions and four shadow functions. Now let's correlate these. Three function modes. There are, for every quadra, there are four three function modes. For every quadra, there are four functions that are not part of that quadra. So, you ask, unison. Okay, I understand how to convert a three function mode to an emulative function, how to figure out what function that should emulate. But why? Why should the three functions emulate this other function? Well, I'm glad I pretended you asked. If you imagine we have these three functions, TE, FI, and SI. And it kind of goes in a circle. It's a triangle, but think of it as like a circle. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, it's almost like it's orbiting something. Now, what would it be orbiting? Well, if you imagine that, and this is kind of the idea of what a shadow is in the first place. If you imagine that there's an inclination in this person, this person, they have TE, FI, and SI, okay? So this is a delta quadra person. Now, what they might not want to do is get really pedantic about logic. Yet there's some part of them in the right situation that would, but that part is repressed. That's going to be a piece of the shadow. So when a person develops this mode and they're orbiting something, in the center of that orbit is a inclination to be pedantic about logic. Everyone experiences it. It's a human thing. Some people do it. Some people don't care. So, TI in the center. How would this person, if they have this shadow inclination, get the closest possible to releasing that inclination so that it's not repressed, but it's actually recognized and utilized as a part of them? Well, they don't have the function itself. They can't directly use TI, but they can do something really close. But if they keep doing all three of these that have TI in the center and keep oscillating between them at regular intervals, then they can maintain proximity with this TI inclination in the center. Now, let's be clear. That is not true TI. It is an emulation of TI. Although it is an emulation and it's not the same as the real thing, what it does do is it brings the ego and the shadow into a state of cooperation instead of a state of conflict. The usual interaction between ego and shadow is that, the ego wants to be the top dog, right? And so it pushes the shadow down. The inclinations to be the opposite of what a person normally is get repressed and pushed into the unconscious. When they're pushed into the unconscious, these things want to come back up. These inclinations want to be seen, want to be heard, want to be lived. That's the whole idea of what the shadow is. Now, when that occurs, a person has a choice. They can either work with it because it really is a part of them too, or they can repress it further. But if they do, then this part of them becomes angry. It festers. It's a part of them that has been wanting to come out, but they won't let it. That's why aspects of the shadow are often seen as negative, but they're really not negative. They're just the opposite of what somebody normally is. So when somebody engages in a three-function mode, and you have that, they're orbiting around the function that they're emulating, the ego is carrying out a little bit of the will of the shadow. And so they're using a part of them that has always been a part of them, but they're using it in a way that allows that inclination, the inclination of their shadow, to emerge as a living expression. When the ego and the shadow are in such a state of cooperation, that aspect of a person can be utilized. So now you have a person who has TE and FI, but they can, when they want to, get logically pedantic about something in a stereotypical TI kind of way. And although what they're doing is not real TI in the same way, they can still exercise and bring to light that part of them. And when one learns to do this with all four of the functions they don't have, that is a marker of, if not self-actualization itself, at least shadow integration. Which is something that, nobody's talking about right now, and we want to start the dialogue on. Because if we've seen it, other people can see it too. And this is exciting, because if three-function modes do emulate shadow functions, the idea of shadow work And shadow integration becomes a topic that no longer needs to be delegated to the esoteric and the obscure. This becomes a measurable phenomena. Measurable to the point where you can assess how far somebody is in their shadow integration journey. You can assess how far they are in their journey, and you can even assess what it is they need to work on to continue this journey. We're bringing this news not as a look at what Axis 12 has discovered thing. Like, we want people to be talking about this. This is important stuff. And that's, at Axis 12, that's what we want to do. We want to discover things that people can use, that people can further the collective understanding of human psyche with. So that is the hypothesis that we are bringing to you today. Now, we are very confident in this hypothesis. We have seen it prove itself time and time again, but at the same time, we're very cautious. It takes a long time to bring something from the point of hypothesis to theory. And there's a lot of groundwork to cover. There's a lot more testing to do. And I can't tell you when we're going to feel confident in calling this a theory instead of a hypothesis. But we are working towards that. And we invite other communities, other systems, anyone who wants to get involved to look at this too. Let's discover what we can. Let's remember why we became interested in personality typology in the first place. Why was anyone studying this stuff from the get-go? So we invite you. Join us, if not directly, go do your own studies. If we are all studying the same thing, we're studying human nature, our ideas will converge. And together, we'll be able to find more than we have ever imagined. There are answers. Answers are just sometimes hard to find. Look for them. You'll be surprised.